Sir, hands where I can see them. Step away from that door.
I live here. This is my house.
We received a call that someone is attempting to break into this property.
I'm not breaking in. I'm unlocking my own front door.
I need you to step back from the door and get on your knees right now.
I'm not kneeling. This is my house.
Officer Randy Coulter, badge number 7732, had been with the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, for 11 years. In those 11 years, he had accumulated 19 formal complaints, 13 of them filed by black residents in the Brookhaven Estates subdivision, all describing the same pattern: aggressive responses to non-emergency calls, disproportionate force during detentions, and a documented tendency to treat routine calls in predominantly white neighborhoods involving black residents as active threat situations before a single fact had been verified. Every complaint had been reviewed by the same internal affairs lieutenant. Every complaint had been closed. Coulter had never been placed on administrative leave, never been required to complete bias retraining, never once been required to account for the gap between what his complainants described and what his reports claimed. On the evening of November 8th, at 7:41 p.m., Coulter responded to a 911 call from a resident of Brookhaven Estates, a woman named Carol Pembroke, who had lived at 14 Sycamore Ridge Drive for 4 years and who had called to report a black man attempting to break into the house directly across the street. The man, she said, was acting suspicious and didn't look like he belonged in the neighborhood. She did not describe a broken window. She did not describe a forced door. She described a man standing at a front door with a key. What Carol Pembroke did not know, what she had failed to learn in 4 years of living across from that house, was that the man at the door was Staff Sergeant Darius Cole, United States Army Rangers, 75th Ranger Regiment, decorated veteran of 4 combat deployments, recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor and the Purple Heart, who had landed at Charlotte Douglas International Airport 6 hours earlier after 9 months in Eastern Europe on a classified advisory mission, and who was, at the precise moment Carol Pembroke reached for her phone, doing nothing more or less than coming home. His decision to stand at his own front door with his own key on the night of his return would result in a confrontation captured on 3 cameras, witnessed by 7 neighbors, and produce a $2.8 million settlement, the permanent termination of Officer Coulter, and a reform of Forsyth County's 911 call verification protocol that would become a model for counties across North Carolina. Before we go any further, drop where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you believe a man who spent 14 years serving this country should be able to unlock his own front door without being forced to his knees on his own lawn, hit that like button and subscribe. Because what Carol Pembroke did with her phone on November 8th and what Randy Coulter did with his badge 11 minutes later is a story that needs to be told all the way to the end. Darius Cole had thought about this moment for 9 months. Not the confrontation, not the neighbor, not the patrol car that would eventually roll up to the curb of Sycamore Ridge Drive with its lights painting the front of his house in alternating red and blue. He had thought about the door, the specific weight of the key in his hand, the particular resistance of the deadbolt on a cold evening, the sound of the latch giving way, that sequence of small, ordinary sensations that mean you are somewhere you chose, somewhere you belong, somewhere that is yours in the most fundamental sense of the word. He was 36 years old. He had grown up in Greensboro, the youngest of 3, in a household where his father had worked the same line at a manufacturing plant for 27 years, and his mother had taught 4th grade for 31. He had enlisted at 22 not from desperation, not from a lack of options, but from a decision he had made with the same deliberateness he applied to every significant choice. He wanted to be part of something that demanded the absolute best of him every day, without exception. The Army Rangers had provided that. They had also provided 4 deployments, Afghanistan twice, Iraq, and most recently the advisory mission in Eastern Europe that he could not discuss in specific terms and did not try to. He had bought the house on Sycamore Ridge Drive 3 years ago. He had saved for the down payment over 6 years of careful discipline, declining the things that his colleagues spent money on, because he had a number in his head and he was moving toward it. The house was a 4-bedroom colonial, more house than he needed for a single man, but exactly the size he wanted room for his mother when she visited. Room for the woodworking shop he planned to build in the garage. Room for the kind of life he intended to build when the deployments were finally behind him. He had paid into the mortgage from deployment. He had monitored the lawn care service he'd arranged before leaving. He had a neighbor 2 doors down, Marcus Webb, a retired teacher, who collected his mail and kept an eye on the property. The flight from Charlotte to Winston-Salem was a 90-minute drive. He had rented a car at the airport, a mid-size sedan, the practical choice, and had driven north on I-85 through the November dark, thinking about nothing consequential. What he would eat. Whether the heat was set right on the thermostat, whether the woodworking books he'd ordered before deployment had arrived. He pulled onto Sycamore Ridge Drive at 7:38 p.m. He parked in the driveway. He sat in the car for a moment, not from fatigue, but from the particular deliberateness of a man who has learned to be present in significant moments rather than rush through them. He got out. He retrieved his duffel from the trunk. He walked up the 3 front steps to his porch. He put his key in the deadbolt. Across the street, behind a gap in the curtains at 14 Sycamore Ridge Drive, Carol Pembroke was watching. Carol Pembroke was 54 years old, had lived in Brookhaven Estates for 4 years, and had called the non-emergency police line 7 times in those 4 years, twice about noise complaints that were later found to involve no excessive noise, 3 times about vehicles she described as suspicious that turned out to belong to residents or their guests, and twice about individuals on foot in the neighborhood who were, upon investigation, residents or residents' family members. None of her calls had produced an arrest. None of them had produced any finding of criminal activity. All of them had involved black individuals. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office had no mechanism for flagging repeat callers whose calls produced no enforcement action. Carol Pembroke had never been told that her pattern of calls was a pattern. She picked up the phone at 7:39 p.m. 911. There's a black man trying to break into the house across the street. He's been standing at the door for a minute. He doesn't belong in this neighborhood. I've never seen him before. I think he's breaking in. The dispatcher asked, "Is he forcing the door? He has something in his hand. It looks like he's trying to get in. Is the door open? I don't know. Please, just send someone." The dispatcher sent a unit. The unit was Randy Coulter. Coulter arrived at 7:51 p.m., 13 minutes after the call, 3 minutes after Darius Cole had entered his home, taken off his boots, and was standing in his kitchen filling a glass of water. He had not yet turned on the lights in the front of the house. The living room was dark. The kitchen light was the only illumination visible from the street. Coulter pulled to the curb. He saw the rental car in the driveway. He saw the dark living room. He saw a shape moving in the back of the house through the sidelight windows. He did not run the license plate on the rental car. He did not check the property records for the address, which would have produced Darius Cole's name in under 45 seconds. He did not call out from the curb or announce his presence. He approached the front door with his hand on his service weapon and knocked with the authority of someone who had already decided what he was walking into. Darius heard the knock and came to the door. He opened it. He was in his socks. He was wearing the same civilian clothes. He had traveled in dark jeans, a gray Henley shirt, his Army-issue watch. He had a glass of water in his left hand. Coulter looked at him. He looked at the glass of water. He looked at the dark living room behind him. He did not look at the duffel bag visible just inside the door, which had Darius's name stenciled on the canvas in military-issue lettering. He did not look at the framed photographs on the wall behind Darius' family photographs, the kind that accumulate over years of actual habitation. He looked at a black man standing in a dark house in a white neighborhood at night and made a decision in under 3 seconds. "Sir, step outside. We received a report of a break-in at this address." Darius stepped onto the porch. He was calm, the specific calm of someone who had operated in conditions where losing composure was a tactical error, where the most dangerous thing you could do was let emotion override assessment. He looked at Coulter's badge, read the number, looked at the body cam on his chest, and said, "There's no break-in. I live here. I just got home. Can you prove that?" The key in my pocket opened the front door. There are no broken windows, no forced entry, no evidence of anything other than a resident entering his own home. He paused. What specifically did the caller report? Someone suspicious at the door. Someone at their own front door with a key is not suspicious behavior. Darius's voice remained completely level. Do you want to see my ID and my mortgage documents? They're inside. Calm. Step off the porch and onto the lawn. I'd like to understand why. Because I said so. Move to the lawn now. Darius stepped off the porch. He stood on the lawn in his socks on a cold November night, and he did not say anything further for a moment. He looked at the street. He saw Carol Pembroke standing in her open doorway across the street, watching. He looked back at Coulter. I want to be very clear, Darius said, that I am complying with your request under protest. I am not doing so because you have stated any legal basis for this detention. I am doing so to prevent this situation from escalating. He looked at the body cam. My name is Darius Cole. I own this property. I have lived here for 3 years. I returned from a 9-month military deployment 6 hours ago. I would like to retrieve my identification and my property documents. Stay on the lawn. Then I need you to tell me what crime you believe has been committed. Coulter's hand moved to his belt, not to his weapon, to his handcuffs. What I believe is that I have a report of suspicious activity at this address, and you are not cooperating. I am cooperating. I have told you who I am. I have offered to provide documentation. What specific instruction have I failed to follow? From 2 houses down, Marcus Webb, 68 years old, retired social studies teacher, the neighbor who had been collecting Darius's mail, had stepped onto his front porch at the sound of a patrol car arriving on the quiet street. He stood in his doorway and watched. He recognized Darius the moment he stepped onto the lawn. He had last seen him the morning before his deployment. 9 months ago, he reached for his phone. A woman walking her dog on the opposite sidewalk had slowed to a stop. She held her phone at her side with the screen facing the scene. A couple in the house to the right of Darius's property had come to their front window. The street was quiet, the way streets are quiet, when everyone present is watching the same thing and not yet certain what kind of thing it is. Coulter took 2 steps toward Darius. Get on your knees. The request, the specific words, the specific demand landed in the cold November air with a weight that the body cam's audio captured completely. Darius looked at Coulter. He looked at the lawn. He looked at the street, at Marcus Webb in his doorway, at the woman with the phone, at the neighbors in the window. He looked back at Coulter. I will not kneel on my own lawn, he said. His voice was quieter now, not from uncertainty, but from the specific register of someone who has made an absolute decision and is communicating it as fact rather than argument. I have served in the United States Army for 14 years. I have been in 4 combat deployments. I came home tonight, after 9 months away. I am standing on land that I purchased, in front of a house whose mortgage I pay, and I will not kneel in front of it. He kept his hands fully visible, both of them, at his sides. But if you believe you have lawful cause to detain me, I need you to state it now, on camera, clearly. Coulter reached for Darius's arm. From down the street, Marcus Webb called out, Randy. His voice was loud enough to carry. That's Darius Cole. He lives there. I've been collecting his mail for 9 months. He just got back from deployment. Coulter half turned. His hand was still on Darius's arm. I know this man, Marcus said, walking toward them now. I have known him for 3 years. His name is on that mailbox. He is a United States Army Ranger. Coulter looked at Marcus. He looked at Darius. He did not release Darius's arm. Darius said, quietly, looking directly at the body cam. I am going to reach into my right front pocket with my left hand and retrieve my wallet.
I have served this
My
country
military
for 14
identification and my driver's license
I
are
am not
inside.
getting on my
He
knees
moved his left
in
hand
front of my own home.
slowly, deliberately, narrating each motion. I am removing my wallet. 8. I am opening it. He held it flat in his palm, facing outward. On the left side of the open wallet, in the clear plastic window, a North Carolina driver's license. Name: Darius James Cole. Address: 12 Sycamore Ridge Drive. The address Coulter was standing in front of. On the right side, a United States Army identification card. Photograph: name, rank, branch, 75th Ranger Regiment. Coulter looked at the driver's license. He looked at the address. He looked at the house number on the mailbox to his left. 12. He looked at the military ID. He looked at Darius's face. The street was very quiet. The body cam was running. Marcus Webb was 8 feet away. The woman with the dog had her phone raised at chest height, screen forward, recording. The couple in the window had not moved. Carol Pembroke was still in her doorway across the street, though she had stopped watching with the satisfied attention she'd had earlier and was now watching with something that looked like the early stages of understanding what she had started. Coulter's hand came off Darius's arm. It didn't happen with any particular grace. His fingers simply released, one at a time, the way a grip loosens when the muscles receive a different signal than the one they were expecting. He looked at the wallet. He looked at the body cam on his own chest. He looked at Marcus Webb. He looked at the woman with the phone. He looked at the address on the mailbox. I was responding to a call, he said. The words came out smaller than his earlier instructions had. You were responding to an assumption, Darius said, made by someone across the street who saw a black man with a key and decided that was evidence of a crime. He took his wallet back. He held Coulter's gaze without anger, without anything except the specific, steady clarity of someone who has already decided what comes next. Your body cam has been running since you arrived. So has my neighbor's phone. So is the camera across the street that covers my front porch. He paused. I want your supervisor here. I want a formal incident report opened. And I want the name and contact information for the person who made the 911 call. He looked at the mailbox with his name on it. He looked at his house. And then I would like to go inside. Sergeant Patricia Dunmore arrived at 8:09 p.m. She had been 4 minutes away when Coulter radioed for a supervisor. She had not been told why. When she pulled up and saw Darius Cole standing on his lawn in his socks in the November cold, holding a military ID and a driver's license with the address of the house behind him, while her officer stood to the side saying nothing, she understood before anyone spoke. She identified herself. She looked at the credentials Darius showed her. She looked at Marcus Webb, who confirmed everything in 2 sentences. She looked at Coulter. She said 3 words to him. Go to your vehicle. He went. She turned to Darius. I apologize for this. What do you need from me right now? I need this incident formally documented with timestamps from the original call through this moment. I need Officer Coulter's body cam footage secured. I need the 911 call recording preserved. And I need someone to tell me who made that call, because that person filed a false police report. Dunmore produced a notepad. She looked at the time, 8:11 p.m. She wrote it down. She called dispatch for the documentation hold. She then walked to Coulter's vehicle and held out her hand. He unclipped his body cam. He held it for a moment, a long moment, in which the weight of everything recorded on it was fully present before placing it in her palm. Then he reached for his badge. The Forsyth County Sheriff's Office shield, worn for 11 years. He worked the clip loose. He placed it in her palm beside the camera. The metal was cold from the November air. Dunmore bagged them both. She logged the time, 8:14 p.m. She told Coulter to go to the department and wait. He drove away from Sycamore Ridge Drive for the last time as a law enforcement officer. The internal investigation was completed in 14 days. The findings were straightforward to the point of requiring no interpretation. Coulter had responded to a call containing no specific allegation of criminal activity, had failed to run any verification before approaching the property, had demanded a resident kneel on his own lawn without stating any legal basis for the demand, and had attempted a physical detention that was captured from 4 angles: his own body cam, Marcus Webb's phone, the woman dog walker's phone, and Darius's front porch camera, which had activated automatically with motion detection at 7:51 p.m. and had run continuously. Coulter's complaint history, 19 complaints, 13 from black residents, was reviewed alongside the footage. The investigators' report produced a single finding that was cited in every subsequent legal proceeding. The documentation sufficient to address Officer Coulter's pattern of conduct has been available in this department's files since his 4th year of service. The department's failure to act on that documentation is institutional, not incidental. Coulter was terminated 38 days after the incident. His North Carolina law enforcement certification was submitted for review and revoked. His pension, earned over 11 years, was forfeited under the state's law enforcement misconduct provisions. He applied to departments in 2 neighboring states. Both background checks returned the body cam footage. Neither application advanced. He found work eventually in a distribution center outside of Winston-Salem. His name returns 380,000 search results. Carol Pembroke was charged by the Forsyth County District Attorney with filing a false police report, a Class 1 misdemeanor based on the 911 call recording, which documented her stating that the man appeared to be breaking in despite having described him doing nothing more than standing at a door. She was additionally named in the civil lawsuit filed by Darius Cole as a private citizen. The lawsuit alleged racial discrimination, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and false imprisonment, the last count, based on the period during which Coulter had his hand on Darius's arm without legal cause. The civil settlement was announced 5 months after the incident, $2.8 million. Forsyth County's liability carrier contributed $1.7 million, reflecting the institutional failure to act on 19 complaints over 11 years. Carol Pembroke's personal liability was assessed at $380,000, her home equity, largely based on the finding that her 911 call had been racially motivated and had directly caused the unlawful detention. She settled rather than face trial. She sold the house at 14 Sycamore Ridge Drive within the year. She moved. The new owners of her former house introduced themselves to Darius within 2 weeks of moving in. The Forsyth County Board of Commissioners adopted the Cole Protocol named at the board's own initiative, not at Darius's request, within 8 months of the incident. The protocol required all 911 dispatchers to ask 3 specific verification questions before dispatching a unit to a residential call, alleging suspicious activity. Was there evidence of forced entry? Was there an observable crime in progress? Had the caller attempted to verify the individual's identity or connection to the property? If all 3 answers were no, the call was flagged for supervisor review before dispatch. The protocol reduced unfounded residential suspicious person calls, resulting in police contact by 41% in its first year of implementation. The North Carolina General Assembly, responding to advocacy by a coalition of veterans organizations who had taken up Darius's case publicly, introduced the Home Defense Act legislation requiring law enforcement agencies statewide to implement property record verification protocols before responding with armed officers to residential break-in calls where no forced entry was reported. The act passed both chambers and was signed into law at a ceremony that Darius attended in civilian clothes. He did not speak at the podium. He had been asked and had declined. He stood in the second row with Marcus Webb and watched other people use his story to make an argument he had already made, on his own lawn, in his socks, on a cold November night. Darius Cole donated $1.4 million of his settlement to 3 organizations. $500,000 went to the Ranger Memorial Foundation, which supports the families of fallen Rangers. $500,000 went to the North Carolina Veterans Legal Services, providing free civil legal assistance to active duty and veteran service members facing housing, employment, or civil rights issues. $400,000 established a scholarship at North Carolina A&T State University, his father's alma mater, for students pursuing degrees in criminal justice with an interest in law enforcement reform. The remaining settlement proceeds he used to finish the woodworking shop in his garage. He built the bench himself. He built the shelving himself. He built a cabinet for the kitchen that he had been planning since before he deployed. He built it over 3 weekends in January, with the heat on and the radio playing and the particular satisfaction of a man doing work he had chosen, in a house he had bought, on land he had earned. The key still hangs by the front door. Same key, same deadbolt, same 3 front steps. And he comes and goes as he pleases. He always did. If you believe a man who served 14 years in the United States Army Rangers should be able to unlock his own front door without being forced to his knees on his own lawn, share this story with someone who needs to understand what a phone call can cost when it's driven by assumption instead of fact. What policy changes would stop 911 from being used as a weapon against people who belong exactly where they are? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you believe 19 complaints over 11 years should have ended this before a soldier came home to find a cop waiting on his lawn, subscribe. We are not stopping until the system that closed those complaints runs out of places to pretend it didn't see what it saw.